Welcome on into Love of the Stars. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout Brian Broaddus. 2/5 of the G-Bag Nation, which you can hear 2 to 7 on 105.3 The Fan Central Time or on the Odyssey app. And there is always Cowboy news, Brian. It does not matter what part of the season you're in. Things are happening. Now, we officially do have a new head coach, and Brian Schottenheimer. I know you and Eric really did an excellent job breaking some of that stuff down, but the staff is now coming into place. It is official. Matt Eberflus is going to be your defensive coordinator, and he's brought back some coaches that he's familiar with, but also a coach in Aaron Whitehouse that doesn't really have ties to one Brian Schottenheimer or Matt Eberflus, and he's going to be the defensive line coach who came over from Robert Saleh with his time in San Francisco, and then went over with him and was there for the last 4 years for the New York Jets.
Yeah, and you mentioned about Matt Eberflus and the hire. And the thing that's interesting, what I'm getting a sense from over there at the Star is that these hires are going to be Brian Schottenheimer hires, Matt Eberflus hires. We'll see, they're in the process right now of dealing with potentially with an offensive coordinator, with Adams from the Arizona Cardinals. We were told to kind of tap the brakes on that one. They've talked to him. Now he's officially going to come in. I've got that confirmed from some folks in the front office that he is here in the building. So we'll see if, in fact, that they, by the end of the day, do they have a new offensive coordinator, and then that would be a new offensive line coach. But really encouraged by hearing that Brian and Flus are going to be able to hire their own guys. No disrespect to the front office. As a general manager, Jerry Jones does have a right and a prerogative to be able to say, hey, what about this guy? What about this guy? It seems like the one holdover has been Lunda Wells from the previous. Now, there were questions that I had, and Lunda Wells wasn't announced as a tight ends coach or an offensive line coach. He wasn't announced as any coach at all. It was just announced as a signing. So
Sure.
If in fact we get a new offensive line coach, then Clayton Adams, if we get him, then Lunda Wells will probably be coaching the tight ends once again for your Dallas Cowboys. If in fact the Adams thing falls through, then maybe Lunda Wells might slide into that offensive line coaching spot, and then they go out and hire a separate tight end. So a lot going on at the Star. It's encouraging that the coach, the head coach, is being able to select the coaches that he wants to work with on staff.
And, I think, and at least from my perspective, this does seem like usually what the Cowboys will let the head coach do, at least the first go around. Go ahead and hire who you want. But then if that doesn't work, then maybe now we're going to have input in the future, like with Mike Nolan having not been successful year one under Mike McCarthy. Now we're going to go ahead and Dan Quinn, Mike Zimmer, maybe that was more influence from the front office than necessarily Mike himself.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And it just went to show you, it could be a little problematic hiring friends for positions. And Mike McCarthy felt very loyal to these coaches, whether who he brought in, the Jim Tom Sulas, the Mike Nolans. He brought in Rob Davis, guys he worked with in Green Bay. So he was out of a job, and now he's got a job, and now he's trying to take care of, people that helped him and took care of him along the way. And to his final days, he was still trying to take. What's interesting, though, is that he did work for Brian Schottenheimer's dad, and it's kind of where there's some dynamics where Jerry Jones in front of the media said, hey, Brian had to bite his lip at times.
Yeah.
So, sometimes as a friend, I guess you do have to bite your lip. But I think as a friend, you'd also want to say, hey, listen, man, you are effing this thing up. Or, hey, we need to think about this. And that to me, where maybe the relationship between Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy was not as connected as we might wanted to believe, even though that Marty Schottenheimer, Brian's dad, was very influential in what Mike McCarthy has become as a head coach.
I think that's you do get in trouble kind of hiring people that you know. And
Yeah,
that's why I think getting some outside perspective, like the
sure.
defensive coach Aaron Whitecotton, who doesn't necessarily have ties, but has run an excellent defensive line there with the
Right.
Jets, had success in San Francisco. Previously was with Sean McDermott in his first staff there in Buffalo. And we know how well respected Sean McDermott is as a defensive mind. So you do have some guys that have worked previously, like Dave Barganzi, the linebacker coach. That's a Flus guy,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
he's bringing his dude in there that he knows and then trusts. And then Andre Curtis, who's worked with both Shoddy and Eberflus. He's a 48-year-old coach that's coming over that has ties to both, as I mentioned. But I do like now you're adding in a guy in Aaron Whitecotton. And then if they do go ahead and hire as the offensive coordinator Clayton Adams, then that's also somebody that doesn't necessarily have ties with Brian Schottenheimer that can offer a different perspective and really can be a massive positive and impact when it comes to the rushing attack. And that's something that Stephen Jones also discussed in his interview at the Senior Bowl was that's a point of emphasis. How do we improve our running game? And I think all of us who have watched the All-22 during the season, there's not a whole lot of creativity with the Cowboys rushing attack. The pin and pull stuff is something you've talked about a lot. And that ate the Cowboys alive when they played Arizona 2 years ago. So he's able to kind of bring in a different approach and maybe something that Brian Schottenheimer hasn't run before when it comes to a running scheme.
Yeah, when you start to talk about with Adams, and visiting with folks in Arizona, they clearly don't want to lose the guy. They understand what they have with him, but there's intensity, there's toughness, there's that ability. Not a yeller screamer guy, more of an encourager, a guy that's willing to play the rookies and the veterans together, teach them that way. Don't separate things. I think that one of the things that maybe the setbacks that we saw with Tyler Guyton, some self-inflicted, but some also, though, coaching staff like, listen, we're fighting for our jobs here. We can't play this guy. He makes too many penalties and stuff like that. Hopefully Tyler Guyton will get a fresh start here when it comes to, whatever line coach that they bring in. And, hopefully it is Adams, but I heard nothing but positivity about him as a coach, in the places he's been, Stanford and Indianapolis, places like that, where there's an air of that physicality. I know we're working with David Shaw and stuff like that. You're going to be because I admire David, I really, really do, and as a head coach and what he was able to do, that was a team that lined up in 22 personnel with two tights, extra linemen, whatever. There was about, we're going to physically run the football. And it's that kind of attitude that you need to have. Now, the Cowboys, you and I we love the NFL draft. We're probably going to have several of these shows that we're working on where we're going to be talking about offensive linemen and the type of offensive linemen. And the type of guys that have these toughness. So they get that coach in there, they get the attitude in there. And then now it's about, okay, can you get Guyton to play at a higher level? Can you get Cooper Beebe to play at a higher level? What's going to happen at right tackle? We saw that, with how they were able to, it got better over there at right tackle as the season wore along. But are they going to add more pieces to this offensive line to make it? They're clearly going to have to add a running back to this thing.
Right.
And so we'll see how that all plays out. But I am excited about the guys that Flus is bringing in, hearing very positive things about them. And then also, though, what we're doing, I think Lunda Wells is a really, really good coach. There's people in the organization who will tell me that Lunda might be a better offensive line coach than he is a tight ends coach. So keep an eye on all that.
Yeah, it certainly it is exciting. Some of the moves that they're making here along the coaching staff, and Eberflus is a guy that had a lot of success with the Colts. Turnovers were something that they were really good at. That's something the Cowboys had success with under Dan Quinn. for his tenure here, but then also kind of a bend but don't break approach where they might give up yards, but when they get into the red zone area, very stingy. They were kind of top 10 consistently in points allowed. Not a defense that's going to give up points very easily, limiting the big play. All of that where you're kind of keeping. I mean, safety might be a conversation we've got to have as well
Sure.
when we talk about the draft, which will. Brian, one thing that you brought up the offensive line.
Yeah.
The Cowboys have drafted 2 offensive tackles. Now, one is a guard now in Tyler Smith in the last 3 drafts.
Right.
I'm always for attacking the line of scrimmage, but is this Cowboys offensive line as far away right now as it seems like maybe fans feel like it is? Like, how much more help do they really need? Or is it just, we drafted Tyler Guyton in round 1. We need you to develop and be the guy that we thought you could be.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And, was Mike Solari getting the absolute best out of these offensive linemen? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Now, do you have to give him credit for this? If you look at, I never believed that, well, shouldn't say never believed, but look at what they've done with some of the backup offensive linemen, that have shown up. And some of these guys have had to play. Awesome Richards had to play a little bit. Brock Hoffman, I think Brock Hoffman for 5 weeks is better than Brock Hoffman for 17 weeks. Yeah. So I'm looking at that spot as like, listen, him, TJ Bass, tip of the cap to the guys. Great job of filling in. Really the Zach Martin thing as the season wore along, it was very clear that Father Time really caught up with him. Injuries, Father Time, a lot of things going on. They just were not very good at right guard. And when he was out of the lineup, they seemed to improve. Steele at right tackle improved. You got to give them a little credit for that. But there needs to be more there. There needs to be. You can't go out and look at the Philadelphia Eagles playing in the Super Bowl. They've done a really nice job with their offensive line. But you got to hit on some guys along the way. Jordan Mailata, makes up for some of the busts that they've had.
Andre Dillard, right?
Andre Dillard, exactly. Andre Dillard was a first-round tackle out of Washington State and never did anything. So sometimes if you bust on some of these guys, you better have somebody in position, to be able to take over. The Jeff Southland, the coach over there in Philadelphia, is outstanding. He makes a difference. That offensive line is built well. They've got a running back that's outstanding. They've got tight ends that are willing blockers. That's kind of where you need to be to run the football. And I'm interested to see, and everybody always says, oh, it's interesting to see. But really it is if in fact that Clayton Adams comes in and is the offensive line coach, can he take this offensive line to the level that we've seen in the past? The Cowboys have had a great history of offensive line coaches. You go all the way back to the Super Bowl days with Tony Wise, Hudson Houck, guys like that. Bill Callahan, Running Game Moses. Yep. Those line coaches made a difference. And to me, I know Todd Archer and I have always had these discussions about, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and he goes, all right, give me the next most important coach. And I'm like, I think about it. He goes, how about the offensive line coach? And I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So yeah, this is going to be a really important hire because you're probably going to address this offensive line at some point at the draft or in free agency, but it might not be with the 12th pick. It might not be with the 44th pick. It might not be, with the 74th pick or 73rd, whatever pick it is. But, you might not. You might have to. This might be the group that you have to go play with, and a line coach is the one that's going to make the difference on that.
And we will talk a lot of NFL draft as well. And we plan to do that with you right now as you're listening to Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Now, Brian, we had some fun yesterday. We did some mock drafting on the draft show. Now, we did a 3-round simulation Okay, and the Cowboys are picking at 12, and there's a lot of players that we're watching the Shrine Bowl, we're watching the Senior Bowl, and we can discuss some players that maybe have helped themselves. But we came across with I thought like a pretty solid group of 3 picks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, 12th overall, when we were on the clock, Mike Green, the edge out of Marshall, who has now started just turning heads. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, this Mike Green, he is an absolute savage animal. And he is. He is. And it's not a surprise that he's done this at the Senior Bowl. Maybe the impact and like absolutely putting a guy like Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon, who could be a first-round tackle, and just driving him backwards onto his rear. You don't see that every day. But he goes a pick ahead of the Cowboys at 11 to the San Francisco 49ers. So when we were sitting there on the clock, Ashton Jeanty was there, who I think we both had as best player available. He's the 3rd best player overall on my board.
Sure.
And then there was the conversation of receivers. Okay, Luther Burden out of Missouri was still there. Yep. Emeka Egbuka was still there out of Ohio State. And then you did have offensive linemen available. Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas was on the board. And Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, was on the board. Now, if we strictly went best player available, right, and we didn't window dress the board, Jeanty would be our pick.
Sure.
But we did have the conversation about, okay, let's kind of look at 44. Do we feel like there's a running back there? If we want one that could slide, and we gambled, and we went ahead and we pulled the trigger on Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State. Now, why did you want to lean Simmons? And then what are also the risks involved with that pick?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Number one is, I love the exercise of trying to figure out where players are going to go. And you're absolutely right. Best available player on your board would likely have been, we'll see if Jeanty, well, like I say, we'll see. There might be people that have Simmons and Jeanty and, but the exercise I wanted to see personally was if we take that offensive lineman, what running backs were available. That's what, that's honestly where I wanted to see this thing go. If like I said, I'm absolutely in love with Jeanty. I do understand I have a very, very high grade on Simmons as well, but I wanted to see where this thing was going to take us, and so when you took the offensive lineman as the draft went through to 44, then Johnson becomes available for you there at 44. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is Johnson and Hampton from North Carolina, are they honestly going to get to you at 44? That's the question you now have to ask yourself, and what if the real thing I wanted to, what we really should have done is should have maybe thought about taking, if you take Harmon there at 44, or take one of those wide receivers and see what, and then run through and see what running backs available to you, with that 3rd round pick. And would you have been happy with that? That would have been, to me, that would have been the real trick, is to, okay, let's keep not taking a running back and seeing which one was available. Would you have been comfortable, with that 3rd round pick taking a running back? Would you have been happy with the group? Me personally, I feel like that we would have been okay with it. I don't know if we'd have been able to get the quality that we got for sure, at 12, surely at 44, but could you have lived with that running back in the 3rd round? Is it, and I've heard you say it as well, it's clearly a drop off between Jeanty and then what Johnson and those guys. Yes. I mean, it's Johnson and Hampton are 2nd round players. I've got Henderson in the 2nd round as well. And there's a lot of folks that believe that Henderson could very well go in the 2nd round, but how wiped out are you going to be at running back? Because the thing that's kind of messy right now for the Cowboys, without that 4th round pick, you do not have a safety net there. If you do not take a running back with the first 3 picks, and you can't get back in the round, in the 4th round, to pick a guy, that's going to be a little tough. That is going to be a little tough, considering what a need it is. But, people will tell you, oh, well, you could get running backs in the 5th round. Well, you can't get running backs as good as the ones you were looking at 44 and then at 12. You can't get that, you can't get that. And there's a lot of holes in this team, folks. I'm just telling you, they're going to have to do some things, I think, in free agency at linebacker. They're going to have to go get an Eric Kendricks type player, maybe 2, because right now I don't see the depth of linebackers in this draft. I just don't. I've seen good linebackers, but I haven't seen the level that I've seen guys that run well, move okay, have no instinct. I don't need linebackers that are fighting blocks all day and losing the football. I mean, we've seen that happen here when, unfortunately, Damone Clark, people like that. We've seen linebackers that have come in here and they physically look great and they move around great. And then when it comes to going to making plays, they can't make plays because they don't see it well enough. They don't know how to get off blocks. They don't have instincts. They can't play in coverage, So they're going to have to do something, I believe, at free agency with these linebackers. They're going to have to go get somebody. But going back to the whole exercise, what we were doing, I would have been interested to carry that running back thing all the way to the 3rd to see who was there and just run that thing out. And if it was somebody that I was comfortable with, my feeling is we probably wouldn't have been comfortable there. It probably would have been a 4th or 5th round running back that we would have probably had to take if that's where because like I mentioned, you don't have a 4th round pick as we sit here right now. So to sit there, we'll just wait. Well, yeah. What are you going to wait on? You don't have a pick. You can't wait till the 4th. So in my opinion, I think Dallas is going to have to address the running back situation in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, because in the 3rd, some names that maybe we would have been looking at, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, who I know you like quite a bit, maybe Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, who's been having a good Senior Bowl, but I don't know, maybe they look at him and think he's a little bit smaller. Now he's 5'9", but he does weigh well at 205.
Right.
John Judkins out of Ohio State. To me, that's a player that is a similar style that you had in Rico Dowdle, but a better player. But he's not a home run threat. See, that's the thing that you're going to have to do here, Brian. And you've talked about this, and I agree with you. If you don't take Genty, or if you're not lucky enough to get Caleb Johnson out of Iowa to fall to you, or O'Marion out of North Carolina, you might end up needing to double up on this thing. And maybe it ends up being, okay, I take Judkins in the 3rd, and then maybe in the 5th round, if you stick with all 3 of your 5th round picks because you got all the comps, maybe I'm looking at taking a Cam Scatabo if he's still on the board, or somebody to pair with him. Maybe it's an RJ Harvey if you're lucky enough to get him there, or a Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech. But you might end up saying, like, all right, I might need 2 backs because I don't know if I've really got my workhorse. That's why, to me, if Genty's there at 12, I'm kind of Genty or bust. It's just I don't have to worry about it. I know for sure I'm getting a player that's going to be good. He's going to instantly be one of the best players on my roster. He's going to be the 2nd best player to CeeDee Lamb on my entire offense. I can give him the ball 20 to 25 times, and he's a guy that's going to make an average offensive line good, a good offensive line great. Because how many times did you see him behind a pretty offensive line at Boise State? And this dude, he never goes down. The first guy he is always making miss. That is a rare trait that he has that really no other back in this class has. There's some other talented backs, but he's rare in that regard.
The people will argue with me on this, and that's cool. I'm all for the discussions that we have. He can make, and people probably hate when I'm going to say this, he could make an average offensive line better. And what you could do is, as you're working on getting your offensive line better, he's growing with the offensive line too. He is in hand. You're right about the ability to make people miss. I think that's important. Look where, we've seen with our guy in Atlanta, they finally kind of figured out, how to use him in a way to like throw him the ball, hand him the ball, still make people miss. That's where this if your offensive line's struggling a little bit, if you got a back that's capable of making people miss right off the jump, you're going to have some success. And then your offensive line can maybe get a little bit better. Maybe you plug somebody in that's a little bit different, and then now your back's even better, but he's helping your offensive line kind of overcome any kind of deficiencies that you might have in it. You put an average running back behind a average or below average offensive line, you're probably not going to run the ball very well. I mean, early in my career, I watched Barry Sanders, I watched Walter Payton, I watched guys that never played behind great. Now, Payton's line at 85 Bears with Jimbo Covert and Hildenberg and guys like that. They were Mark Bortz. They were a good line. They got better, but he had a lot of his success playing behind some just pretty good offensive lines, not great offensive lines. So when you have a generational player like him, it does make sense because he does help your offense when you're trying to grow and develop offensive linemen.
Absolutely. And to me, he's also so special as a player. Heck, you're getting tremendous value. Like that's the argument with running back, right? Oh, you're not getting the value if you take a pick high. Right. If I'm getting the third or fourth best player in the draft at pick 12, I think that's pretty darn good value. Instead of reaching and just taking a guy like, heck, in a perfect world, if you wanted to plug it, maybe I need a right guard. Take Tyler Booker out of Alabama. He's a true right guard, a guy that I think we like a lot. But is he at 12? Is that a little rich? Would you be reaching? Probably, but you'd be drafting to fill a need. That's where you fight drafting for need or drafting the best player on the board.
See, that's where, guy like Banks comes in for me because I see Banks as a guard. What bothers me about Banks is I found myself now with these these playoff games. You could go back and watch Texas play Clemson. You can watch them play Ohio State. You could watch. You've got the Texas A&M game came in. There's games later in the season you could watch on Banks, and he's not as good. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of, okay, is he really? What can you do with him? Is he going to come in? Is it going to be like with this guy's played a ton of games? I'm not comparing to Guyton or anything like that, but you're just kind of, it's not as slam dunkish, if that's even a word. It's not even slam dunk like it is to me with Simmons. That's a slam dunk offensive lineman. I have my concerns about all these guys. I haven't seen a center worth a damn yet. You know what I'm saying? So to me, I'm trying to kind of find the best guy, but I don't know if necessarily at 12, unless it's Simmons, I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for me to do. Not Campbell. I watched Campbell play 4 years at LSU. He's got some good traits. People think he should be a guard. I think you're probably in that camp.
Yeah,
so
it's mainly just because of his awkward stance at tackle. That guy needs to move inside the guard. I can't watch this.
See, that's if you draft, and I said this in our show, if you said this, and if we said this in this draft yesterday, excuse me, I got distracted there for a moment. If you're going to draft Simmons, you better have a plan. You better have a plan. What you're going to do with Guyton, and are you going to let Guyton compete next to Steele at right tackle? But you better have a plan. Don't go in there and draft him, and then when we get to ask questions, and after the first night of the draft, and what's the plan? What are you going to do? Well, no, we're going to move Guyton back to right tackle. He's going to compete against Steele, and the best guy's going to win the job, and we're going to go. That's how it needs to be. I don't think Simmons to me would be plug and play more so than Guyton would be.
Yeah, as long as the knee's good, which I think.
And see, that's the problem. That's a problem. And I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth to you, Zach, because I'm the guy in the first round at 12 wants to get the best player, health, and then the best off the field or best character guy. Yeah. And here I am talking about drafting Simmons, and his health could be good, but there is a question mark about it.
Right.
So
yeah, and for those that don't know, he missed the rest of the season, hurt his knee in the Oregon game in the second quarter, was out the remainder of the year. And honestly, what exactly the knee injury was, they weren't very open about. So that's going to be
and we'll find out. Yeah, we'll find out here very soon.
Hopefully, we get some more information about that.
We will find out. Yep.
Wide receiver, I feel much better about this class, Brian. I don't know if you do, having watched the Senior Bowl practices, getting to be there firsthand and watching some of the Shrine Bowl practices. You and I think we both felt there's no comparison between this year's receiver class and maybe what we've seen in the last 3 years. And I think that there's maybe, if you want Travis Hunter as a receiver, I think that's an elite option for you.
Sure.
If you want Ted McMillan as a receiver, I think that's an elite option for you. After that, like Luther Burden, what he does after the catch is exceptional. But I think there's some question marks about the size. Can he win consistently on the outside? Emeka Egbuka, I've heard some people are nervous about. Is he more of just a slot-only type of guy? Similar questions to Jackson Smith-Njigba, because that's the role that he took over within the offense. Right. I don't have those. I think he can win on the outside. But everybody's probably got a different look. But even those guys, if you were to stack them with some of the other receiving classes, like what we had last year, they'd probably be more in the Ladd McConkey range. We're talking more at the top of the second round, bottom of the first, like where Brian Thomas Jr. went at LSU to Jacksonville last year. I don't know that we'd be looking at them in the top half of the first round if we're just comparing groups. But I've been impressed with what we've seen from Tez Johnson out of Oregon at the Senior Bowl. I was impressed with Nick Nash, the wide receiver out of San Jose State at the Shrine Bowl. Efton Chisholm out of Eastern Washington, who's a very, the Cooper Kupp comparisons write themselves, short, white, slot guy, right? But he finds a way to work open, has strong hands. This receiving group, I feel a little bit better about, that you might actually be able to find a guy in that third round than I did, say, a week ago before these bowl game practices.
Yeah, there's a quality to a certain degree, I think, because I really do like Royals from Utah State a lot. I like the way he fits my eye better than Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson's, don't get me wrong, explosive. We saw at the Senior Bowl this week what he is able to do, against Thomas, a quality corner from Florida State. So yeah, there's a lot to like, but like I say, Harris from Ole Miss, Royals from Utah State, Johnson from Oregon, Higgins from Iowa State. Can't run out of sight, but the kid makes a lot of plays. He's pretty good run after catch. Besh from TCU helped himself at the Senior Bowl. So it's a good group. I think you could find guys. Do you want X's? Do you want slots? Do you want, who do you want? I think you could find it in this group that we currently have.
Yeah, I mean, the two Texas kids, Golden, Isaiah Bond, I think you're a little lower on. I've got him probably in the third round.
Yeah.
But, I mean, heck, Alec Ayumanor, the Stanford kid. I mean, that could be a perfect compliment. The second round, if you don't go wide receiver, he's on the board at 44. That's a guy I'd have a serious conversation about to pair with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, he's played, he's a Canadian kid, and he's played, I think his best football is ahead of him with the way he plays. And he's played in a system at Stanford where, the quarterback play has not been ideal, and so he's struggled with that, but he's a bad ball catcher. If you want to be really bold and brave and YouTube a game, go watch him play the 2023 game in the second half against Travis Hunter. I mean, he literally carries Stanford to victory in that game.
2 touchdowns.
They couldn't stop him running inside routes and slants and down the field. Yeah, this kid is a big-time player and very well could be in the second round, yeah.
He is. So, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's been fun watching these guys. We talked about some of the highlights. I think offensive tackle, some guys that really helped themselves. Jonah Savavaina, the offensive tackle from Arizona, is a guy. He's going to play guard for me, and I think that most teams will see him as a guard. He had some really good reps that I saw at the Senior Bowl. Ariante Ursary the offensive tackle from Minnesota that I know.
Much better feet. Much better
he looked
feet.
better, right? He did.
Sure
he
did.
looked better.
Sure did.
He was a heavy-set guy at Minnesota, but that power is just special that he has. Good run blocker as well. And then Wyatt Milam from West Virginia is another guy that I like, but really Gray Zabel, I think, from North Dakota State, helped himself the most out of any offensive lineman probably at the Senior Bowl.
Well, Gray Zabel, the one thing is you can watch North Dakota State open the season against Colorado. This is when, and North Dakota State plays great football, national championship. They live in Frisco at that championship venue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's North Dakota South right there. And so to me, when you look at the way he played, the matchups he had, the flexibility playing tackle, playing guard, they moved him around quite a bit, and he thrived in all the opportunities he got. So, good for him. He helped himself. People have questions all the time about competition. He had some really good competition. Not that North Dakota State does not play great competition. They do. But when you get to the Senior Bowl, it's a little bit different when a North Dakota State guy can line up and block a Georgia kid or block an Alabama kid or block a South Carolina kid. You know what I'm saying? It's a little bit different, and he did a nice job with that.
Yeah, and shout out to Thomas Perry, Middlebury at the Shrine Bowl.
There you go.
We kind of fell in love with that kid, man. That's another small school dude that came in, helped himself a lot against some really good competition. So
sure did.
I mean, this is going to be fun. So anytime you get, we'll be rotating on Love of the Star. Eric Chiafalo will also be in the mix as well. But most of the time, I think leading up, Brian and I will try and lean into the draft with you, since that's kind of the area that we both lean into with, of course, the draft show, all of our coverage on 105.3 The Fan. But we'll be able to bounce back and forth. So anytime you guys have some draft names or some draft questions, we'd love to attack those with you here on Love of the Star anytime Brian and I get together moving forward. But we do want to hear from you here on Love of the Star. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. So you and Bobby Belt dubbed this the Dean Julia Mailbag.
Absolutely. Yep. Dean Julia, longtime listener, big fan of the program, loves to ask questions. So yeah, we've Bobby and I, in honor of Dean Julia, have named the Mailbag segment after him. So it's well-deserved for him.
It is. And we got a lot of really good questions. I don't think Dean Julia actually has a question in here today, which is unfortunate. But Dean, I'll be looking for you moving forward. But we'll start off with Joshua, who wants to know about the Eberflus hire here, Brian.
Yeah.
With him in as a defensive coordinator, I got two questions. One, do you think this will help Mazi Smith? Could it end up being a breakout? Do you think this could help Mazi Smith? Do you think this could be a breakout year for him? Two, will Micah play more defensive end, or do you think Flus would play him more at linebacker?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think Flus will probably use Micah as an edge more than he will linebacker. But out of necessity, he might have to play some linebacker if they don't get everything kind of buttoned up like we were talking about earlier in the program. I think that to me with Mazi Smith, Mazi showed improvement, and I thought there was an opportunity for Jeff Zugina and then also for maybe Greg Ellis to stay on board and be a holdover coach here. But it looks like that's not going to be the case, that they're making some changes over. So a lot of it has to do Mazi and let's be honest, Mazi, Golston, Osa, all those guys played better, better this season, with Jeff Zugina and Greg Ellis as the coach. So it's something that you always kind of hope, but it's kind of sad in a way. Mazi Smith having to play with another coach, I'm saying, having to maybe start over. So maybe some of the positivity, he was outstanding in games against division opponents, Giants, Commanders, Eagles. He was playing some of his best football against those guys. Just needed to, I was hopeful that you have a game against the Commanders there at the very end where there's some positivity going in to the season, into the offseason. He is going to need to work extremely hard and be dedicated and be focused to come back. And maybe with the new staff, he'll show some of those things.
Fingers crossed, because I did think we saw an improved version of Mozzie Smith, to your point, the second
Yeah.
half of the season. The consistency was there. Like, I don't think he had really
Yeah.
stacked, 4 quality games together. And
Absolutely.
He did that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
To me, that's a great step in the right direction. And that's so important for Aaron Whitecott and the new defensive line coach, building that relationship with Mozzie, because he does see, and we got to see it firsthand at training camp. Like, he kind of needs constant, almost reassurance, but also he likes that accountability. Like, he'd be coming out every day with Coach Z, to your point, and they'd be getting extra work in. And I think that's important for Mozzie.
Absolutely.
Okay, Travis F. Has a draft question. All right, which tandem would you prefer? Ashton Jeanty and, say, Besh or Savion Williams, either the TCU receivers? Or would you prefer Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Mizzou in the first round, and Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina, in the second?
It's a good one, because I think Hampton is DeMarco Murray, and I really do like Luther Burden a lot. I'll tell you, Besh is an interesting cat, and I got him in the second round. I got Jeanty in the first. So to me, this is 1 and 2. But give me the combination. Give me the combination of Jeanty and Besh.
Yeah, I like that too. Besh has grown on me the more because after the Senior Bowl stuff, I'm like, okay, I need to watch more of Besh.
Yeah.
I did my initial study, and I liked it. Like, he doesn't drop the ball.
Never.
But he is also a pretty strong, willing blocker.
He's tough. Tough kid. Yeah, he is.
He's one of those where, like, it doesn't look like, I don't think he's going to test really well, but
Probably
he's football fast. He just finds ways to get open, and he will run away from some guys. Like, he's an impressive player.
I think, to the texter's point, I'll tell you what, you've helped your offense really both ways. You really have. The players you've asked us to interchange are really guys that are going to, I think, play significant roles for their teams wherever they go.
Brian, this has been a blast, man. Episode 2 for me on Love of the Star. We look forward to doing this with you, pumping out 2 episodes a week. We'll try and get consistent with the days as well. Now, next week, we're going to be out in New Orleans. We're going to be in your just natural habitat, Brian. This is going to be incredible with oysters and po' boys and food galore. But we'll be out there covering the Super Bowl. So maybe we can get some Love of the Star action. Maybe all 3 of us join together with Eric Chiafalo. We can pop in with you on Radio Row. That'll be a lot of fun.
That'll be a lot of fun, man. Looking forward to looking forward to working with you and Eric going forward. I think we've got a great product. I really do appreciate all the work that Bobby Belt did on this show, helping us grow the show. But we're out there for you guys, the audience. We comment to us, tweet at us, ask us questions and things like that, and then hopefully we'll make this thing even bigger and better for you in the future.
Absolutely. At Brian Broaddus, at Zach Wolchuk. You can follow us. We're always here for you on social media and for all of your Cowboys content. Until next time on Love of the Star, hugs and hand pounds, everybody.